Welcome everyone to IDF's virtual education event, The Impact of Isolation and the Value of Compassion. We are very excited to have you joining us today. My name is Ashley Ferreira, Program Manager for the Immunodeficiency Foundation, and I will serve as your host for today. Before we begin, I would like to pass it over to our CEO and President of the Immunodeficiency Foundation, John G. Boyle, to personally welcome you. Hi, John.
Hi, Ashley, and thank you so much for hosting and being the MC today. And hello to everyone else who is joining us. Well, on behalf of the Immunodeficiency Foundation, I would really like to thank all of you for taking a little bit of time out of your evening. As we pivot from what was originally supposed to be an in-person education meeting in Houston over to this, the first of a new virtual series that we have at IDF. That we are calling Empowerment Through the Power of Community. The pivot to virtual events is not only important for where we are today, but ultimately where we think we can go in the future, since we believe that using this approach will ultimately enable us to help more people within the PI community. Now, to make sure that our future events are the best that they can be, we're going to need your feedback after this event is over. Responding to the evaluation that you'll be receiving in the near future, I believe via an email, will help us as we continue to fine-tune the events that will make sure that we're actually giving you what you want and need, because that is the reason for our existence at IDF. Well, speaking of what it is that you want and need, this virtual series was born out of what you and other members of our community had requested. We've been working closely with our presenters to create this new virtual series that addresses issues that we've all seen impacting our community. Now, this series is different from the other meetings that I know a number of you are used to, because it's going to go into new territory. Mental health, kind of the application of IDF's core values, and really bringing in larger swaths of the community who might not have necessarily been able to come to the sort of meetings that we had in the past. This series is going to go into special topics and panels of community members that'll share their experiences, really in part to highlight the power of community. And then these events will, of course, touch on IDF's values, a core part of our mission. This first session in the series is going to highlight isolation and the value of compassion. Isolation is, of course, something that is on everyone's mind right now. And compassion is one of the core IDF values that we, the staff and the Board of Trustees, over the course of the last year have agreed on as, among the cornerstones of what IDF organizes itself around. And in terms of these other pieces that guide us, our core values are the three I's: inclusion, integrity, and innovation. Our guiding principles, which is different, include commitment, leadership, and accountability. And then our constituent promise, or promise to all of you, transparency, trust, and finally, compassion. I would like to thank the sponsors of our slide. This includes our core service leaders, CSL Behring, Grifols, and Takeda, our core service sustainer, Horizon Therapeutics, our national sustainer, Accredo, and then our national partners, Diplomat Specialty Infusion, Kedrion Biopharma, CVS Specialty, Quorum CVS Specialty Infusion Services, Koru Medical Koru Medical Systems, and Kaba Fusion. So once this meeting is over, once you have claimed your prize or gone on, the meeting will be over, but the learning and the fun do not have to stop. So we really hope that you will take some time on our website to see the many resources that IDF has to offer, the publications, the online support groups, updates on upcoming events, help with insurance, and so much more. And in addition to that, you'll see that we have a COVID-19 page that we keep up to date as much as we can with any new information that we think is of particular interest to the PI community. So once you've checked out the website, make sure that you're following IDF and possibly me on social media. You can find the links, some of them right there, Twitter at IDF Community, Instagram at IDF Community. We are in all the places. And the more that we are connecting, and one or two channels really does not do it, thanks to those good old algorithms. So we hope that you will follow us on all the platforms that you're active on, so we can keep in touch and share information. So, with all that said, I would like to thank you for being a part of our community, and thank you for helping us to pilot this new type of event as the world around us and our programming continues to change. And I'm really, truly grateful for all of you for coming out here today. Your participation, your insights, the feedback that you give us really helps us to better serve not only you in the future, but all the others within the PI community as we adjust to our new normal and make sure that everyone has the information that they need to live their best possible lives. So with that, I would now like to hand it over to Sholi Webster from CSL Behring for a quick word from one of our sponsors. Sholi?
Well, hi. Well, first of all, thank you all for having us here. I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to work for an organization like CSL Behring, and as well as to be associated with someone like the IDF Foundation. But I hope everyone's safe. I'm, again, glad to be here. Happy to answer any questions when we get to our virtual breakout room. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that welcome, Sholi, and thank you for your welcome, John. At this time, I did want to share a quick disclaimer with you before we begin. IDF understands that the COVID-19 pandemic is a rapidly evolving situation. So we encourage you to check our website often for updates, like John mentioned. Also, please remember that the information presented today during the event is not intended as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, but rather we're here today as a trusted source and as a friend to our community to provide you with the information that can be used to help understand the current situation that we are in. With that, I would like to hand the stage over to our first medical presenter, Dr. Sarah Nicholas, who will speak on COVID-19 and the impacts to the PI community. Dr. Nicholas serves as the Clinic Chief and Director of Solid Organ Transplantation at the Baylor College of Medicine, Texas Children's Hospital, and we are delighted to have her join us today. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Nicholas.
So hi, my name is Sarah Nicholas. Thank you for that introduction, Alyssa, and thank you to all of our sponsors and everybody who's been involved in making this such a great new type of event. I've been at Texas Children's for 14 years, and I've had the pleasure and honor to work with many of you over the years, although you may not recognize me with all of my new gray hairs that I've developed over the last few months. I've always focused on primary immunodeficiency and the immunology of solid organ transplant, and I'm sort of, this is a new world for all of us, and I'm going to primarily focus my talk on what we do know about COVID-19, and then spend a little bit of time talking about the impact specific to the IDF community. And I would say a little bit of time, not because I don't think that that part is important, but because we really just don't know very much. So, this is kind of what we have, and we're learning new things every day. And if we have this event again, in a month, I'll probably have, a whole bunch more information to tell you. But right now, this is kind of what we have. So we can get started. So what is COVID-19? I think that's always a good place to start. Coronaviruses it's a family of viruses that include the common cold and then some other more severe illnesses you may have heard of over the years that have had sort of sporadic outbreaks, including the Middle Eastern respiratory virus and then SARS. The virus that causes the illness, this is just a little bit of terminology, the virus that causes the illness is called the Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus number 2, or SARS-CoV-2. And that's the name of the virus that causes the illness. And then the illness itself is called COVID-19. And I think, for the sake of simplicity, I will probably refer to it interchangeably as COVID-19 because it's just easier to say and makes things less troublesome. So COVID-19, what kind of symptoms or syndrome does it cause? It's primarily fever, dry cough, shortness of breath, fatigue, and respiratory distress. These are sort of the hallmark symptoms that have been widely reported. But there's a lot of other stuff being reported. Diarrhea has certainly been reported. Sore throat, body aches are really common things we're hearing. And then as this is a new disease, we're continuing to hear and learn about new things. Some of you may have heard in the media recently about COVID toes. These are small sort of reddish pink dots that are showing up on people's toes and actually really sort of the rest of their feet, which can over time either blister or peel, or sometimes they're turning purple. And we think this is actually a result of the body's immune system's response to the virus and possibly not the virus itself. So this is sort of an interesting symptom that people are learning about over time. So how do we spread the virus around? And it happens in several ways. When an infected person coughs or sneezes or even just breathes, they produce droplets of moisture that go into the air, and these droplets of moisture contain the virus. An uninfected person can come into this contact with these droplets through several ways. They can have direct contact with the person who's coughing or sneezing and get the virus that way into their mucous membranes, into their mouth or in their nose. They can directly breathe in these droplets. They don't stay in the air for long, but they can stay in the air long enough for somebody to breathe them in, and that's where the masks come in. And then the other third thing that can happen is that we can get them by touching the droplets. As I said, don't stay in the air forever. And so when they land, they sometimes land on doorknobs or kitchen counters or other surfaces that then an uninfected person might touch. And these get on our hands. We don't think that we get the virus from the virus going through our skin. So probably you don't get the virus by it like burrows through your skin on your hand. What we think happens is then you touch your face with your dirty hands and it gets in through your mouth or your nose. So this is why it's so important both not to touch our face and to wash our hands. So even if we get the virus on our hands, we still have a chance not to get the virus into our bodies. So that's sort of our last defense. And this slide is really just illustrating kind of where the virus goes when we breathe it out. So typically it stays in a range of about 3 to 6 feet, which is where the stay 6 feet away from people guidance is coming from. But it can, in some situations, particularly we think with exercise, probably go a little bit further. And particularly, you know, when you sneeze, obviously there's a much bigger distance and speed. All right. So, you know, this is a new virus, and I think it's worth taking a minute to reflect on the somewhat breathtaking rate we have had it spread across the world, and then also what we've learned in such a short period of time. So just sort of by way of perspective, you know, on December 31st of last year, of 2019, the Wuhan Health Commission first reported an unusual cluster of pneumonia cases. On January 13th, the first case outside of China was reported in Thailand. On January 28th, the first case in the United States was reported in Washington State. And then in February, a lot of things happened. There were a lot of new outbreaks in South Korea, in Iran, and in Italy. And then the US implemented travel bans to those countries plus China. On March 11th, this was a really big day, the World Health Organization labeled the disease a pandemic, which is a very specific designation that has to meet several criteria, though at that point it was quite clear that that's what was going on. The NBA announced that one of its players had contracted the virus, as did Rita Wilson and Tom Hanks announced that they had contracted the virus. And then also the US announced a travel ban from all European countries except for the UK. And Harris County, where many of us are located, declared a local disaster for public health. So it was sort of, a lot happened. March 13th, the president declared a national emergency and many schools started closing, including schools here in Houston. And then on March 14th, Harris County issued the stay-at-home, work safe order, which is now in effect through April 30th. And then as of today, there have been 1 million cases in the United States alone. So really, it's sort of breathtaking when you think about how quickly this virus has spread and how quickly it's become a household term and how we've really had to adjust our lives so dramatically in this short period of time. And in particular for people who are struggling with other diseases, access to care has been affected, among many other things. So really it's been a remarkable period of time. This slide I made yesterday. It's already out of date. It's out of date every day, but this is an excellent website. The Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Resource Center has excellent up-to-date data on case counts across the world, and then specifically in the United States. So as of yesterday, there were over 3 million cases and 210,000 deaths worldwide. And then in the United States, as of today, we have surpassed 1 million cases in the United States. So they also break the data down by the United States, and you can get all the data by county as well. So how bad is COVID-19? We've discussed that it's become a huge piece of our lives and really a piece of everybody's life, but how bad is it? And when we think about how bad an infection is, we sort of think about two things. We think about how infectious it is. You may have, or how easily does it spread? So you may have heard the term R0 in the media. This is just a fancy way of saying how many other people does each sick person infect? And things that are sort of very infectious are things over on the right side of this slide include kind of measles and chickenpox, which each sick person infects an average of 8 to 9 other people. The second thing we think about when we think about how bad a virus is how deadly is it? And it seems fairly obvious. And what's the mortality rate? So things with high mortality rates include bird flu, Middle Eastern respiratory virus, and Ebola. This is over on the left upper corner of this graph here. And so where does COVID-19 lie in all of this? The real answer is we don't fully know, because it's a brand new virus. We don't know how it's really going to affect the community. And then we haven't done enough tests to truly know how many people are infected, which obviously affects both our how infectious is it and mortality rate. So it affects both numbers, but we think it's sort of somewhere in the middle. We think transmission is about 1.5 to 3.5 people per sick person. And we think the fatality rate is around 0.7 to 3.4%. So these are fairly large ranges, and there's a lot we don't know, but this is what we sort of think where it lies, where this orange arrow is. And then this just, again, is another way to look at comparative mortality. Again, you see Ebola at the top, and then MERS, and then sort of down towards the bottom are things like seasonal flu. COVID-19, you can see there's two bars for it. COVID-19 so far has 3.4% mortality rate overall, but we estimate it's actually closer to 1 because we think we're dramatically underestimating the number of cases, and that affects the percent mortality. So now for sort of the meat of it is what about COVID-19 in people living with primary immunodeficiency? And as I mentioned, this is like the meat of what we'd like to talk about, but we don't know a lot yet. So we're working through that. And so we're looking for this information. One of the ways we're doing it is the CDC is collecting data on all the people who are diagnosed with COVID-19. They're doing this through this case reporting form. And as you can see sort of circled on the form, they do ask a question about whether the patient with COVID-19 has a immunocompromised condition. So this gives us some information, but it doesn't tell us primary immunodeficiency or cancer or on some immunosuppressive medication. It doesn't really give us a lot of information. And there's sort of if yes, please specify that, maybe you get some good information there, maybe you don't. The other thing I think is important to note is they also ask about chronic lung disease, which is something that unfortunately a lot of people who live with primary immunodeficiency have. Some people have comorbid asthma, but a lot of people actually have bronchiectasis or other lung problems related to their primary immunodeficiency. And so there's sort of multiple reasons to think that people with primary immunodeficiency might have risks for bad outcomes with COVID-19. As you guys all know, there's many different flavors of immunodeficiency. There's over 400 recognized types. The primary most often, or not the primary, but the most common type is B-cell or antibody immunodeficiencies, but the next biggest category is actually the other category. And then we have SCID or severe combined immunodeficiency, severe T-cell defects, and then phagocyte disorders. In the United States, we think we have about 250,000 people with primary immunodeficiency, which comes out to about 1 in every 1,200 people. And I love that statistic because I use it when I talk to primary care providers to explain to them that probably every single one of them has somebody with primary immunodeficiency in their patient panel, whether they know it or not. And I think that that's a great way to highlight to general providers to be on the lookout for it and to think about it. Because if you don't think about it, you won't find it. So the immunocompromised state, everybody sort of presumes is a risk factor for severe disease in COVID-19. This is probably the case, but I would just say that there are some reasons to think that some types of primary immunodeficiency might actually protect you from some of the outcomes, bad outcomes associated with primary immunodeficiency, because some of them have to do with the body's response to the virus and not the virus itself. So some of the damage that occurs in the body is the immune system's response. I will say that absolutely with the disclaimer that this is just my interesting thought. It is not a fact. This has not been borne out in any sort of data. So please don't go around the world saying that Dr. Nicholas says that people with immunodeficiency are not at risk for COVID-19, because there's also every reason to think that they could be at severe risk from the virus itself. But there may be some aspects of the virus that would behave differently in somebody with a problem with their immune system. So as I said, it's just unclear whether it will be confirmed by the data or not. There are several ways we are looking for answers to this question. In addition to that CDC forum I showed you guys, the Clinical Immunology Society had set up a database and then joined forces with sort of a bigger international group to put together a more focused database for people with primary immunodeficiencies who get COVID across the world to try to collect data. Which we will be contributing to. And then TCH also set up its own protocol to enter data. Just the more local your data is, the more detailed it will be. The larger the group is, the less detailed the data will be, which is why we wanted to participate both in the global database and our own local one, because I think sort of different types of data can come out of each of them. And hopefully both types of information will help form our ability to understand what's happening in patients who have COVID-19 who also have primary immunodeficiency. So what can we do to stay safe during this time? Since we don't know, and we think that, well, everybody's at risk from COVID-19, but in particular, people who have primary immunodeficiency are at risk. And you guys, of all people, have heard us say this probably a million times. You could probably recite most of these things before COVID even happened, but stay away from sick people. Avoid touching your face, wash your hands, practice social distancing, wear a mask in public, and follow guidance from your local authorities. So, you know, a lot of this is stuff that you guys have been hearing for years, and unfortunately, we don't have anything at this point other to say, so we will continue to say things, and they remain really good advice. You know, I hope that answers some of the questions people might have had, and I appreciate your time, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to talk to you guys today, and I look forward to answering any questions during the Q&A portion of the program.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nicholas, for your presentation. We truly appreciate you being here. At this time, I would now like to invite Irma Tenu from Horizon Therapeutics for a quick word from our sponsors.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Irma Tenu, and I'm the clinical nurse educator at Horizon Therapeutics. And I'm so excited to be here representing Horizon Therapeutics. And as zebras, you may be familiar with medical emergency and staying at home, like we all are now, having to miss events, but it doesn't remove the feelings of isolation. But IDF has shown us that through their virtual events like this and their proactive communications, that you're never alone when you're part of the PI community. So major shout outs and thank you to IDF for organizing this event. Thank you to today's speakers for taking time out of your busy schedules. And I want to thank all the attendees for being here tonight and supporting each other during this tough time. And we look forward to connecting at our virtual booth later on in the evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Irma. We appreciate that. Our next, oh, actually, before we go on to our next presentation, we are going to do a quick trivia poll. So we'll get that going right now. So our trivia question is, what month does National PI Awareness Month take place every year? Remember, if you participate in our trivia polls and submit your email address and name to Alyssa Huston in the chat box, you will be entered to win one of our raffle prizes. So please make sure you participate. I wonder what month it could be. Is it May, January, April, or June? John looks like he might know the answer.
John is having a lot of fun looking at the answers.
Perfect. And so we got April. That is correct. Everyone give yourselves a pat on the back. Good job. Good job. And so next we are going to go to our medical presenter, Dr. Lenora Noroski. Dr. Lenora Noroski is going to speak on the impact of isolation and the value of compassion in COVID-19. She is an immunologist at the Baylor College of Medicine, Texas Children's Hospital, and also serves as their Director of Educational Programming. Please welcome Dr. Noroski.
Thank you, Ashley. Can everyone hear me? I'm thrilled to be a part of this and addressing this very potent topic of isolation and how we can connect that with compassion in COVID-19. I have done my training in immunology at Texas Children's Hospital, Baylor College of Medicine. Sarah Nicholas and I worked together, and we were trained by Dr. Shear, who was the chief of service at the origin of understanding what is immunology and persons who live with it. And now, in the time where we face new diseases, what is that impact? Thank you, Dr. Nicholas, for sharing that with us. Now I'm going to share with you some more things that are dear to me. My training also extends into public health with health education and behavioral sciences. And there's no way that any scientist can do our patients and populations justice without hearing the voice of the patients themselves, of the persons living through the disease processes and how they feel, so that we can be better to serve our communities. So this is the thrust of this session. So stay at home. We must do it. We are forever changed as a society, in our own worlds and in the world, because of COVID-19. Isolation and the impact of it is palpable, because it can be life-threatening, even fatal. It brings fears. It's associated with loss, change, vulnerability, and the unknown. This leaves us with uncertainty, and it's emotionally distressing. This is why over these past weeks of social distancing, even with our tools of social media today, anxiety surrounds all of us. But we can find new ways to adjust and redefine ourselves. Can we? Can we convert these feelings through different feelings of empathy, of compassion? How are you dealing with isolation? Well, you probably have a lot of things that are going through your own minds and what you're feeling. What do you think when you hear the word isolation? What feelings are having on you and your family, your loved ones? Isolation is an integral function of the lives for persons and families with primary immune deficiencies, not just for a few weeks, but for every single day. for life. In this COVID time, now everyone is struggling with the physical and emotional ramifications of isolation. How I faced my coronavirus anxiety. This article is from the journal Science, one of the most respected critical scientific journals. The March issue featured this story on working life from a professor from China who's reflecting, a scientist reflecting on the COVID crisis, dealing with his own feelings that came to surface that were very distracting. This is during the moment of sweeping through China and the death toll rising. He says this: I found it difficult. I found it so difficult to even sleep. I've also had difficulty focusing on my work. All I could do was stare at the screen. I realized that I'd been trying to push my anxieties aside and force myself to concentrate on work, an approach that did not feel natural. From then I told myself it was okay. It's okay to feel anxious. Well, I'm thanking Professor Kai Lu for validating that for us, and for him to share with that was something that is remote for him to be in touch in that particular way. Everyone is affected. For us here now to hear the stories from our PI champions, it's the voice in the stories. They're going to help scientists, help all of us better understand how to deliver the care that is necessary. Today, we learn from yesterday, and tomorrow becomes that learning from today, because tomorrow will be here and we will have learned from today. Because of primary immune deficiency and because of COVID-19, it affects us all. So isolation, I don't think anyone could have described or felt this any more potently than David and Carol Ann and his family, and Dr. Shearer, who took care of him, and all those who cared for him. He stands now as the symbol of isolation even more. He's the iconic bubble and the boy David, who was born in a plastic isolate, completely contained because he was born without an immune system. He lived in this protected environment every day of his life for 12 years, 12 precious years. And David taught us what we know today about immune deficiency and isolation. Social distancing. So with David the bubble boy, he was literally bubbled away in a physical barrier to protect him from the microbes in the world because of the absence of his immune system. And there wasn't a treatment that was ready yet for him. And now in COVID-19, we learned from David how to create our own bubble by distancing. We understand the science of viruses now better, and we understand about how to protect ourselves with a boundary so that we don't transmit or receive this new SARS coronavirus 2, and to prevent the population and the spread of COVID-19. As science takes on the challenge to rapidly identify treatments while we all take on the challenge of isolation. So social media. How grateful are we that we have these tools? We are in a new day for different reasons. And social media, we can do this. We can be connected. That wasn't present in the time with David the Bubble Boy or before. How can we be creative and be ever imaginative on how to do these kinds of things? Mobile devices, FaceTime, Facebook, telemedicine. I'd like to share with you in our own section, we are at least 30% of our office visits now are telemedicine, and that's rapidly growing, meaning we're seeing our patients by phone and video for all clinical office visits, and we're finding ways on how to do that extremely effectively. And now we're doing this. We're Zooming right now, and being able to do this conference, I'm very thankful for. PPE, personal protective equipment. David was one of the ones to first show us what PPE was all about, and now we know how to understand it. Always in that bubble, properly suited, never allowed to touch, skin to skin, in his very short life. And that's David's mother shown there holding David in his protective suit created by NASA so that he could at least be out of the bubble for a short time. And then YVETTE Shorten is going to be also one of our PI champions. They're both going to be talking today about the impact of isolation. And here she is holding her child also without an immune system, who didn't dare leave the hospital room for fear of and the reality of the risk of transmission of other types of infections. Today with COVID-19, we're all garbed in our PPE. And there's benevolent mask makers out there helping the world to be able to be covered, so that not just healthcare workers are in their PPE, but everybody, every day, on the street, wherever you need to be to get food, the things that you need as essential workers, wherever that might be, you have a mask. Flattening the curve is about staying home. Why? Because our PPE, the mandate for general population, is just like many immune disorders. Many children, many people do not look like they have an immune disorder. They can look like anyone, but yet they are so highly vulnerable to any type of infection. Well, COVID-19, we know that 80% of people with COVID-19 may not appear as though they have symptoms, or maybe symptoms will be quite mild that mimic other common viruses. So we just don't know. So stay at home. What is isolation? If you look at the definition, it's solitude, seclusion, being detached, and it's often involuntary. It's a state of one who is alone. The medical definition is taking special precautionary measures used in the care of patients who have contagious diseases, and also precautions to prevent infection to persons who have impaired immunity. In COVID-19, we're applying these with separation of those infected from those who, the infected from the uninfected, and that day on length is 14 days, is based on the incubation of this particular virus. So we know that the social distancing and then would help to prevent the transmission, because again, most don't even realize that they are infected. So the behaviors that go along with this is lack of social fitting in, and we don't have our social freedoms. And the actions of social distancing, quarantine, lockdown, that brings on a physical, emotional, and mental unrest. We have to deal with change, and pretty abruptly, and the trauma and adjustments, anxiety that goes with that. How can we adjust our attitude? Can we have a renewed perspective? What is our mindset? Can we identify love and our needs buried within all of this to achieve wellness? Well, this is really where our PI champions are going to help us understand this by reflecting on their own experiences of isolation as primary immune deficient individuals and groups and in COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Dr. Noroski, for helping set the stage when we go into our panel and those feelings of isolation. What do you folks think is the definition of isolation? Feel free to kind of send us what you think the meaning of isolation is. You can send that in the chat, send that to me, and we'll definitely keep that in mind when we enter a panel. Before we go on to our panel, however, it's time for another trivia poll. Let's see, what is today's trivia question? Okay, approximately how many people in the US are diagnosed with PI? I do know that Dr. Nicholas did talk about this in her presentation, so let's see how many people were paying attention. Okay.
This is the how closely were you listening at that point question.
Exactly. I think a lot of people were paying attention. Oh no. Okay, we are going to end the poll. Good job. It looks like most everyone was paying attention. 250,000. Thank you for participating. At this time, I would like to invite Natalie Leverin from Koru Medical Systems to give us a quick word before we go on to our champion panel. Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Sure. Thank you so much to the IDF team for inviting Koru to join this excellent meeting tonight. Thank you to our speakers for your excellent talks. I was really looking forward to seeing all of you in person at our IDF meetings around the country this year, but I'm very thankful to IDF for adapting so quickly and putting together this alternative forum for us to get together. So on behalf of the Koru team, working hard at our manufacturing facility in New York, we really appreciate the opportunity to join you tonight.
Thank you so much, Natalie. We appreciate that. I did want to encourage participants, if you do have any questions, please feel free to send them to Elizabeth. We will work on getting your questions answered on our website after this event. So please feel free to send those in to us. We are here listening. And with that, I would like to transition. To our empowerment through the power of community panel. This panel session was created with you in mind. It was created understanding the importance of mental health, especially during COVID-19. It consists of individuals from the PI community who are willing to share their experience with us to touch upon the impact of mental health during this time, tips on how to combat feelings of isolation, and how we are stronger together as a community that can use compassion, build each other up. These are our panel members. 5 of them who Dr. Noroski has helped to connect with each other. Our hope is that through the experiences that they share today, you'll be able to use their words of empowerment to help give you the tools that you need to feel empowered during COVID-19, to tackle on those feelings of isolation and any other feelings that we're feeling, so that you know that you are not alone in this journey. We will have a parent perspective, navigating school work with PI perspective, coping and compassion from our doctor with PI, and coping and compassion from a volunteer and individual with PI. So thank you very much to our panel for being here. We're very excited to share this with you, and we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So our first panel member is Carol Ann DEMARET. She is a mother of children with PI, a PI champion, and co-founder of David Elementary in the Woodlands, Texas, named for her son David, affectionately known as David the Boy in the Bubble. She also serves on the IDF Board of Trustees and the IDF Skid Compass Board. We are absolutely excited to have Carol Ann speak here today, and without further ado, I would like to welcome her. Carol Ann, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank
you, Don, and good evening, all. I'm very happy to be here. Lately, I have been reminded of words so much a part of my family's life so many years ago. Words such as isolation, immune system, antibodies, pathogens. It was in 1970 when my first son, David Joseph Vetter, was born, and at 5 months of age, he became ill and was not responding to antibiotics. We were sent to Texas Children's Hospital in Houston, Texas, where after many tests were performed, it was concluded he was born with a genetic defect called severe combined immunodeficiency disease, X-linked, known by the fearsome acronym SCID. A bone marrow transplant was performed, but it came too late. As his little body was overwhelmed with infections, my baby boy died in late November, age 7 months. We wept. We had genetic counseling and we understood our options, but with our hopes and dreams of being a family of many, we decided to put our trust in God, and God did not disappoint us. Soon I became pregnant, and indeed carrying a boy. Because of what was learned from David Joseph, precautions were made to protect our son until a diagnosis could be made. Sterile bubbles or isolators were designed to serve as a crib. David Philip Vetter was born at St. Luke's Hospital in Houston on September 21st, 1971, by way of cesarean and an elaborate germ-free delivery. He was immediately placed into a bubble, and I watched as the porthole was sealed. At 2 weeks of age, it was confirmed he did have SCID. In the beginning, it was thought that the immune system was just immature and he would develop one in a few months, but that was not the case. It was never intended to keep David isolated indefinitely. He had absolutely no defenses against the sea of germs we all wander through on a daily basis. His life-saving bubbles became his lifelong home, isolating him from all human touch. My courageous little boy became known and revered to the world in general, and to medical science in particular, affectionately as the Bubble Boy. The bubbles were made of polyvinyl chloride with thick, black, ambidextrous, size 9 gloves placed in areas convenient to reach David. It was very devastating to hear those words again, severe combined immunodeficiency disease. But we made a commitment to lovingly take care of our gift from God, and we did. David Phillip came home for the first time for Thanksgiving at 2 months of age, and because of the first visit's success, we were able to bring David home for all holidays, special occasions, and he truly lived at home. I hate to think what our lives would have been like had we not been able to bring David home and be a family. David did well inside those plastic bubbles, which grew in size and numbers as he grew. We did not manage this alone. Our support was many: physicians, nurses, technicians, scientists, researchers, and even NASA, as well as family and friends and neighbors. I could see that everyone was giving to David and his family the very best they had to offer. I could see that science and researchers were working to solve the riddles of the immune system, not just to help David, but to help all those who always seemed to be ill from something, those whose quality of life had been corroded because of chronic illness. And eventually, most of those answers did come. And with early diagnosis and treatment, our primary immune community can live a better quality of life. As you know, my son David passed away February 22nd, 1984, age 12. We wept once again. He would have been 50 years old next year. I live with sorrow, but I do not live with regret. And thankfully, I have lived to see and embrace so many SCID survivors and their families, and meet so many PI community families. And I am so grateful to the Immunodeficiency Foundation for introducing me to those courageous families. They make me smile, and I witness their commitment as they advocate for themselves and for their family member. And we are so grateful to Texas Children's Hospital for giving us 12 years with David that we would not have had otherwise. Thank you so much for your attention, and God bless you.
Carol Ann, thank you so much for that. Before we go on to the next one, I just want to ask you, in 1-2 sentences, what are your words of empowerment for those who are feeling isolation right now in COVID-19, based off of your experience?
Well, as a mother, as a family, we lived on hope. We believed that someday this would all be behind us, and David would be released from his bubble, and we could live and watch him grow and mature. And my plan for David was that he would be a doctor or a scientist or a researcher. So we just did everything that we could, and we have maintained hope. And we knew, we believed, and we prayed that with God's blessing, David would have a full life. I am aware of isolation, but actually, this is so familiar to me that staying at home is not all that difficult. When David was home, the summers were especially hard for us, I think, because we lived at our home. There was a big picture window in his room, and David would gaze out the window and he would see that everybody was leaving on vacation. We would watch the boats go by and the trailers go by, and everybody was having, a good time. The winter months were best for us because everybody had to stay home and stay inside. David's attitude for me was my secret source of strength. I didn't realize that until after he passed away. But all the mothers who are tending to children with a primary immune disorder, I think, can attest to that as well. Our children have so much courage, and we honor them by trying to do the very best we can for them.
Thank you, Carol Ann. Thank you. Courage and hope during this time. Very important concepts. Thank you for sharing with us. At this time, I would now like to invite YVETTE Shorten to speak. YVETTE is also the mother of sons with PI, and one whom is also a PI champion here today. She is another one of our wonderful PI champions who serves on the IDF Board of Trustees and our IDF SCID Compass Board. Please join me in welcoming YVETTE, who's going to go ahead and share with us her feelings of isolation and immunodeficiency and how we can apply those lessons learned during this time of COVID. Hi, YVETTE.
Hi. I just want to say thanks to the sponsors. Thank you to IDF and to Dr. Noroski for this time, and honored to be here tonight. I want to start by saying, you know, it did bring a lot of emotions up when I was asked to reflect on what it was like to have a PI child in isolation. And I experienced it in two different ways. With my firstborn son, who was born in 1972, he was placed also, at the age of 2 months, he was placed inside of the plastic bubble. And it was very difficult to leave him after having him home for 2 months and only be able to touch him now through the gloves that Carol Ann described, and to long to hold him again and let him feel my heartbeat close to him. I knew he had to wonder why he was taken away. And he passed at the age of 7 months. When I started to reflect, it was very difficult. I kept thinking of why I was in isolation, but not how I felt about it. And when I really thought deep, the floodgates opened. And I remembered how devastated I was when I heard the word SCID again, severe combined immunodeficiency. Like David, is what my X-linked, and is what my sons also have. And I was so devastated, and I just couldn't even imagine what it would be like now, because they were no longer placing the babies inside of the protective environment of the plastic bubble. But Dr. Shearer at Texas Children's Hospital assured me he would still be safe until we could find appropriate treatment for him. He was placed in isolation at the David Center at Texas Children's Hospital. I first had, my initial feelings was of uncertainties and of great sadness. And then my heart longed to be home with my husband and my 2-year-old daughter. How could she understand what was going on? Being away from them mirrored of a punishment of something, when I'm wondering always, what did I do wrong? How is this possible? Why do we going through this again? Why did God allow this to happen again? As I became more anxious and confused about what was going on, and I had such strong faith that it just weighed on me, that, you know, the confusion of how is God letting this happen. There were times when I felt very disoriented. I'd wake up and it seemed like the days were moving into, were so slowly going by, but then weeks had passed. And I'd wake up in the night, and or wake up early in the morning, and I just felt like I was in a dark, desolate place all alone. It's like I'd just been left with uncontrollable thoughts running through my head that I couldn't even process them. It was so many and so quickly how they just kind of drifted through my head. I desperately wanted to just wake up from this nightmare and go home with my family and my son. I often felt like, why don't I just, this overwhelming desire just to walk away, just walk through the doors and leave. And deep in my heart, I knew that wasn't the answer, but I was just so full of anger and stress, tired, full of anxiety, and I was grieving for that normalcy again, to have what I thought was a normal life, to be able to come and go and just have my baby home. But we were in a room, maybe an 8x6 room, and it was just the two of us until the hospital staff would come into the room. So I was very stressful, especially during the times when you have colic and you're up all night. It was something else to go through alone. But with the help of my family and friends and Jerry's physicians, I was soon able to put everything in perspective again. I realized that God had not left me. I mean, that was my strength, and my hope was in my faith. And I had renewed hope that my beautiful baby boy would have the best quality of life. I knew staying and enduring the process was the only way to ensure that he had a life that he deserved. After all, he was trusting and dependent on me to know what was best for him. And as I prayed, I guess one of the questions was, how did I overcome the feeling of loneliness during this isolation? I prayed and read inspirational books. I would have telephone conversations with my family and friends that would keep me entertained and up to date on everything that was going on. I found that writing and journaling, writing each weight, every day that Jerry was weighed, I'd write it down. How much blood was taken this day. I just wrote so detailed information that now when I look back at those notes, it's really, it brings me joy to know that I did write it all down, because, you know, I would have forgotten so much of it. I was most inspired. You know, one of the other things that I want to say first is that I would visualize my favorite vacations. So things that really give you joy, I would say reflect on those and think about them more. They kind of outweigh the situation of what you're in now. But I would, what mostly inspired me was Jerry. When I realized that our time together was so important, and maybe he just needed a little more me time, and we needed more time together before we entered into the outside world. So I started to look at it as this is just our abundant time. And I'd look at his big, beautiful brown eyes as he slept, smiling in his sleep. And I knew that he loved me unconditionally. And that was the hope that I needed, that one day we'd walk out into a future, and that right now we were not alone, we had each other. And this time in isolation was a bridge of hope for our tomorrow. And then on a lighter note, there were days when I had to play games with myself, sort of as he's sleeping away and I'm sitting in the room looking out the window, I would start playing a game. Guess if the physician, nurse, hospital, or the hospital staff, if they were frowning or smiling behind their mask. I played that game as each one walked in, and it gave me a little joy, and I thought how funny that the things you think about or do when you're in isolation. I'd find find small windows of door would remind me that God was still with me. While in the hospital, I asked the hospital staff if there was a SCID support group, and they gave me a brochure from the IDF, from the Immunodeficiency Foundation. And little did I know that from 1989, I would be involved with such an amazing organization. I was so, as I embarked on this new life, I had everything I needed at my fingertips. I could just look at that, read the brochure, call in, and everything that I needed to know. I felt so empowered that I could go out and do more for everyone else. And this is why my passion lies. I have been involved, as I said, since 1989. I try to do as much as I can to give back to the PI community. My immediate family didn't always understand this, but why I devoted so much time. But sometimes they often criticize me. But I found that my instincts to do what was best for my family, and I never went into anything at all without praying first. And I know that it was my destination was to be a part of the foundation and do what I could to give back. I have found so much joy and compassion from the skid moms, which I didn't say in the beginning. I am a skid mom. I love zebras. And I found so much joy, and I've gained so much confidence from the time spent with my, I call them my sisters, the skid moms. I love each one of them so very much. And they have given me so much in return in just knowing them. I also find compassion and purpose in serving. Serving as a plasma awareness coordinator has given me so much joy. I don't eat desserts. I don't really care that much for them, but it's like eating your favorite dessert or your favorite dish. When you go to one of the centers and you start to share your story with everyone, you see it's like their chest rise, and they sit up, even though they're on this table, but as they're donating, they seem to rise up, and they feel that their efforts, when they know and see and hear stories of what their efforts, what they're doing, really has value, and it gives them a self-worth. So that in turn gives me so much joy that thanking them, they are so appreciative of me being there that, but I'm there to thank and honor them for what they're doing. They just seem to smile and be so happy to meet everyone. They genuinely appreciate our visits. So I cannot hold the compassion that others have shared with me. It's like a cycle. I have to share it and move it forward. I believe that helping others have given me my purpose. I share the experience and knowledge that I can to lift one person. Then I have served my purpose. And in closing, I'd like to say I now view the isolation as a journey. And I have to remember what stages you're in. Be aware of the stage. It's the first stage when you first find out why you're going into isolation. But then at that middle stage, when I was so angry and so stressed and just devastated and felt so alone, you have to know how to pull yourself out of that. You don't want to stay in that position for very long, not in that stage. You find your renewed strength and faith and your purpose, and then you can face the future with confidence and compassion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvette. That was just wonderful. You highlighted so many key points about hope, inspiration, compassion, the power of being part of a community, and how that's just so impactful. Someone did message me about how they also agree that the power of journaling is just so important and powerful during this time. So thank you for sharing that. We really appreciate your time, and I think we'll go ahead and summarize right now. Carol Ann DEMARET and Yvette Shorten as parents shared with us the importance of isolation to companionship, the importance of acceptance and attitude. They both mentioned about having those positive attitudes, that hope, finding purpose as a mother, seeing your children. And they were both mindful, reflective, compassionate, connected, and resourceful. They relied on our resources. They looked up who they could meet with, support groups. That's so important. And thank you so much, Yvette and Caroline, for sharing that. With that, I would like to invite our next panel member, Jerry Shorten. Jerry Shorten is an entrepreneur, public speaker, and an IDF peer mentor. He is also a young professional who was born with PI, who celebrates life because of immune cell reconstruction. Jerry, I would love to welcome you to speak. If you can share with us your feelings of how that you face because of your primary immunodeficiency, and maybe share with us some of your words of empowerment, especially as students and young professionals might be struggling with anxiety of isolation during COVID-19.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to thank everyone that's on the call today for coming out. Thank you, John. Thank IDF for just having me out and to share my story. I always tell people, I'm sorry. My name is Jerry Shorten, and I have SCIDS. And I always tell people that my life started before I was born. And everybody always give me that face of like, well, what do you mean? And I was just like, well, I had 2 older brothers who had the same condition. They had SCIDs too as well. And then David, which I consider a brother too, because Carol Ann is my second mom, also had SCIDs. And I always say that, you know, if it wasn't for David, Texas children, my sister, Noelle, I wouldn't, you know, Carol Ann, my mom, my dad, the family, everybody who supported me, it wouldn't be a Jerry Shorten. It wouldn't be a young professional. It wouldn't be an entrepreneur, a guy who has and lived in this condition and still, you know, at 33, still successful, still doing, I would say, okay for myself. During this isolation time, it's almost funny because I've always dealt with a similar isolation, not necessarily what David had went through and my mom went through with me whenever I was born, because I don't remember that isolation. I was 2 weeks old. I don't remember what happened, but I do know that I always got reminders of, you know, you have to wash your hands. You have to be careful who you're around. Don't touch this. Always getting these reminders of can't do certain things. I couldn't play certain sports. I couldn't do certain things in school that I really had a passion for because of my condition. So now seeing the whole world have to be isolated, it's like, wow, like they kind of see what I feel. And I took this time to really just dig deeper into myself. I'm really big on personal development. I think personal development has really got me through living with the condition called SCIDs, because I never wanted to accept it. I just always wanted to be a normal kid. And I just didn't understand why God chose me to live with this condition and still be living today when I've seen so many other people struggle, for as like losing their life or having a lot of complications. And I used to think my life was terrible, but then I started looking back and I was like, you know what? I actually really have a really pretty good life. And personal development, getting close with God has really got me to where I am today. And anytime that I'm feeling down, because I am human, anytime that I have anxiety and stress, I know that I can turn to God, and I know that I can turn to self-development. And that's really what got me through all of this.
Jerry, would you mind sharing with us some of those personal development tasks, activities that you did? And maybe some of us are, well, what does that mean? I would really love to hear more about that.
Yeah, you know, it all started me just reading more, and then me quieting my brain, quieting my mind, meditating, spending time with yourself, because I love to be around people, but also just to get to know who Jerry Shorten is, get to know who John Boyle is, you know, get to know yourself and just figure yourself out. Meditation, working out, and reading is my alone time where I can think clearly and figure out who I am and what I'm deserved here for life and everything else.
I love that. Thank you. So it really is important for us to really know who we are too, right? And I think that you touched upon some important points. Thank you. I love to read. You know, sometimes people think that just because you're reading a book, you're getting sucked into the story, but no, it's also about meditating on you and your life. And thank you for sharing that, Jerry. We appreciate that. So Jerry, as a young professional, shared with us isolation to mentorship, again, acceptance and attitude, purpose, finding yourself. Who are you? That is so important. So thank you for sharing that. Self-discovery, path seeker creator, adapting and networking for confidence. Jerry's a peer mentor. He networks with other individuals, and that is so important, especially when we're thinking about isolation. It's not a bad thing. We can use that time to reflect on ourselves, but we can also connect with others. So thank you, Jerry. With that, I would like to go on to our next panelist, Megan Ryan. Megan Ryan is a native of Texas. She is a lover of flowers, plants, and gardening, and always planning for an upcoming travel adventure. Sounds like a very exciting life. And for almost 20 years has lived with common variable immune deficiency. We're so excited to have Megan here with us. She's also a longtime volunteer here with IDF. So I would like to invite her to share with us some of the feelings that you face, Megan, without isolation because of PI, and share with us what you think people with PI should know about coping with isolation during COVID-19.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to share some of my experiences. I'm also very thankful and have so much gratitude for people like Dr. Noroski, who has worked so hard on this panel, even coaching each of us who are panelists and helping us understand the feelings that we're experiencing during this time. I'm also thankful for the IDF for pivoting their programming to online programming. It's certainly, even the IDF Advocacy Day had to move from Washington, D.C. to our own homes and offices to make those calls to our elected officials. But let me reflect on those questions and share with you some of my thoughts.
At times, I feel like I've been primed for this pandemic. Since being diagnosed with a PI in 2001, I've been practicing many of the techniques that the world has been learning about over the past 2 months. Frequent hand washing, disinfecting of high-touch surfaces, physical distancing, learning how to shop online, getting groceries and more delivered to one's home or via curbside delivery, avoided crowded venues, and so much more. But at the same time, I've had feelings of overwhelm. I've recognized that prior to the last month, my decisions were my choice. Now I'm faced with imposed isolation for potentially a very long time. I've wondered when I'll see my friends and family again, not just on FaceTime, GoToMeetings, or other platforms like Zoom. When is this COVID pandemic going to be over, and when can life return to normal, whatever normal means to each of us? I've paused and reflected. My primary immune deficiency is going to be with me for the rest of my life. And just like my PI, COVID-19 is going to be around for a long time. From my PI, I've learned to adapt to new normals. So I've been able to take what I've learned from nearly 20 years of living with a primary immune deficiency and apply it to today. Like the roller coaster of feelings I've experienced over the past 6 or 8 weeks with COVID-19, the feelings of accomplishment from cleaning out a closet or with that newfound spare time from not commuting or going to meetings and traveling the highways of Houston. But I've also found feelings of loneliness and isolation from not spending time with friends and family. My PI life has been dynamic with periods of ups and downs. From my PI, I found that I have a good history of being able to bounce back by focusing on the positives, and through that resilience, I know I can get through the lows and adjust to new normals. From my PI, I've learned a sense of community is important. It's through the IDF that I've been able to connect and create a community of like-minded persons living with immune deficiencies. During COVID, I've applied that same thinking to community. I've made it a point to check in with neighbors and friends every day. A few of my neighbors have been the recipients of my frequent quarantine baking activity. Being there for one another during this period is important. Consider finding your persons to check in with each day. Check in with others via a quick email, text, or phone call, or even go back to that old-fashioned snail mail. There's nothing better than getting real mail in the mailbox. While I've always enjoyed outdoor exercise, my practice was not consistent. At best, I'd get it in 5 miles each weekend day and then wonder why I had leg cramps on Tuesday. In the world of COVID-19, I've established a routine of starting my day with exercise every day. Of course, I've had to adapt to make sure I'm outside by 6:15, 6:30 when the trails are sparsely populated. I find gratitude in getting to see another day and experience the awe, that awesomeness of seeing the sunrise. Exercise in any form gives me energy, shows that I have strength and I have the power both physically and emotionally. And that's important to me to manage during this period of isolation. As I mentioned in my introduction, gardening has always been an important hobby and a source of joy for me. During COVID-19, all of my plants have received quite a bit more attention than usual, and weeds stand no chance against me. I've let out my anger at times on some rogue nutgrass, and during this period of COVID-19, I found a great sense of delight in growing vegetables from seed for the first time. I may even have some okra, bell pepper, tomatoes, and more to share in July. I felt disappointment for not being able to travel. My husband and I had a bucket list trip scheduled for June that we were really looking forward to. Eventually, it will be rescheduled. Those places that we were going to visit are thousands of years old and are not going anywhere. So instead, each night I watch travel shows from my favorite travel journalists like Samantha Brown and Rick Steves, and virtually travel to different destinations or relive places that we've been to. As I look ahead, I do have concerns about quarantine fatigue. But when I reflect on the strength that I've gained through my primary immune deficiency journey, I know that I can get through this period too.
With this time, maybe we can pass it on to Dr. Jennifer Pate. Dr. Pate is the Chief of Psychiatry at Baylor St. Luke's Medical Center and is celebrating her 35th year of her diagnosis of CVID. So with that in mind, Dr. Pate, can you please reflect on your role as a physician and a person with PI and describe to us what you felt then and now about isolation as a person with PI, personally and professionally, and from your experiences, what worked for you in converting the feelings of uncertainty, of anxiety because of isolation into a renewed way for compassionate living?
Thank you so much for inviting me tonight. I really appreciate all that you're doing, and Dr. Noroski for inviting me, and the IDF, who I've been a fan of for several decades now. And I'm hoping that we can circle back to Megan because she always has very helpful information to share. So what I want to do is basically a twofold approach to this, because I have both the personal role, but I also have the physician role. So in 1985, I became sick with something that was kind of unclear at the moment. I was hospitalized at Texas Children's, and Dr. Sharon Rosenblatt diagnosed my CVID. I've also since been diagnosed with an additional immunological defect. And so that all ended my professional tennis career, and I decided to go to medical school despite everybody's concern, and I made it through. So let me first focus on the professional part of this, because I think this can be helpful for a lot of you. So I think all of us can relate to this, the fact that the days feel like weeks, weeks feel like years. Most of the time, we don't even have any idea what day it is. What I am seeing in my patients is more depression, more anxiety. Some patients are becoming suicidal over this. As many of you know, we lost an emergency room physician who had been taking care of COVID patients. We lost her yesterday to suicide. So not only does this affect the patients, it affects the healthcare team as well. For those of you with substance abuse issues, or family members or friends who have substance abuse issues, the time is right for this to get worse. We have very easy access to alcohol. We don't have a job that we have to go show up at in the office. And so If you or your friends are in recovery from substance abuse, please stay connected to your relapse prevention plan. Many people are having a lot of trouble sleeping at night, and many people say, I don't know why I can't sleep. That's part of the issue. So create a schedule. And even though you can't stay connected like we normally would be, you can stay connected in so many ways. Call seniors. This is extremely distressing and extremely disorienting to them. Just call and say, hey, I've been thinking about you. How are you holding up with this? Is there anything I can do for you? So like, for example, one of my patients couldn't afford her medicines. So I arranged to have samples sent to my house, and I was able to go deliver those medications to her. The other thing too is foster a shelter pet. You can apply online. They'll bring your dog or cat out to the car and you're off. And not only are you helping yourself, you're helping others. I think what we have to do is focus on the gift of connectedness. Personally, I am talking to friends on the phone for hours that I haven't talked to in many years. We simply send a quick text. Hey, have a good day. Hey, on my way home. But now we actually have some time to spend with people. Some other techniques that I'm recommending that people follow are maintain your schedule, exercise, spend time outside as much as the weather will allow, connect with people, make sure that you're taking your medications and not overusing them, and do things like mindfulness, relaxation, use some of the calming nighttime apps to help you fall asleep. Relying on those tools will really help you a lot. For me, I am very much a sunny side up kind of person. And so throw me an obstacle and I'm going to climb over it. So for me, it's been all about improvising. I'm reaching out to my patients, making sure that they're getting what they need. I'm scheduling online visits with people that need to be seen. And in a way, I'm just really thankful to have the gift of time with my mother and with my dogs. And so, you know, I think we're certainly nowhere close to being back to normal, but together we're better apart. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pate, for sharing. We appreciate that, for talking again about purpose. I think that's so important, acceptance and attitude, being receptive for change and helping others. That's just so important. Thank you so much for that. We're just going to go ahead and go on to the conclusion of this. Thank you to our panelists. We truly appreciate you being here today and sharing your experiences with us. It really means a lot to us. It shows the power of community and how we are here for each other. We really couldn't do this without you. At this time, I would love to invite Dr. Noroski to kind of give us some closing remarks about what this panel was meant to help us with, what we hope to do with the series, and just give us some of her last thoughts. Dr. Noroski?
This was just beautiful. I cannot thank our PI champion panelists enough, because this is the essence of the program, for them to be so brave and trusting, to be vulnerable and reveal their story so that we in turn can be in touch with our own vulnerability and identify so that we can move on. And the whole PI community here, we are connected. Each one of these comments that was so powerful from the mothers of children with primary immunodeficiency, both Yvette and Carol Ann, I wrote down your comments on what to do with your how you found your courage and your hope, with the practical kinds of things of writing down, documenting, and reflecting back on them, and then giving, this whole sense of giving and how that brings such joy And with Megan and her mindset, her ability to be able to come away, and even though she might be overwhelmed, with Jerry, who has taught us how to self-identify, how to self-discover, how to be able to find ourselves before we can find connecting with anyone else, is to connect with self. And Dr. Pate, thank you for giving us some practical things on giving, about reaching out, and how that giving in turn connects us ourselves again and getting ourselves back on a routine. I think all of these things were just so beautiful. And what I have here for us in the close is really facing our feelings of isolation and how can we transform ourselves and bloom. This cactus flower in the corner is really representing the bloom within you and how much you can bloom and are blooming. This cactus flower is a night flower that only blooms in the darkest hour. And I think we have learned today that it's, with our feelings, it's okay to have them and to name them and breathe. It's empowering. What I'd like everybody to do while you're sitting on these clothes is to do any type of pose or breath that makes you feel powerful from within. It doesn't have to be a stance. It doesn't have to be a special yoga pose. It's just breathing and being. To feel in control is possible. We learned that from our PR champions. Take breaks, have limits for yourselves, and this whole attitude, this rearrangement of gratitude will allow us wellness and giving. And feel this power from one another. I feel it here in this session. And at the same time, we are mindful, kind, and connected, no matter what anything else or anyone else is saying or doing, that we can do this. And we nourish ourselves and each other through compassion. I have one, this is Choose to Bloom. I'm going to give this is from Dr. Michelle Pierce, who has Bloom with Michelle, Dr. Michelle, and she has a whole series on night bloomers. Choose to bloom. When you are plunged into the dark and scary times of life, one of three things can next happen. The darkness can destroy us, it can leave us relatively unchanged, or it can help transform us. The science of resilience and post-traumatic growth has begun exploring what makes us likely to experience the latter. Positive growth and transformation. It takes conscious work and determination to choose to be transformed in the midst of loss and suffering. I call people who require the dark times in life to become all they were meant to be, those night bloomers. When we see ourselves as the night bloomers, we shift our perspective from one of fear and despair to one of growth and hope. It could not have been explained and illustrated any better than from our champions today. Thank you very much, and I'd like to give our conclusions. That in our community empowerment, medical experts can provide the evidence, you heard it, necessary to the critical issues. However, it is this that matters most. The persons with primary immune deficiencies can translate these issues from their own experiences into meaningful outcomes for us to fuel medical advances, empower each other, empower persons with PI, and illustrate how we share this compassion among all populations. And persons with primary immune deficiencies can become empowered to be champions. You are all champions. Each one of you on this line, in this Zoom, you are all champions, not only to one another, but also to our medical field, our families, in the world. So with that, thank you everyone for being a part of this. Thank you for IDF for trusting me with working with you on proposing this particular new venue, and everybody who participated to really make it happen, and all the sponsors who are allowing this to go forth. Our champion panelists I have mentioned with my heartfelt gratitude to you, all of you, the PI community. And this is a picture, one of my most favorite pictures of Dr. Shearer, with him really looking out I'm sure he is thinking about so many things that are in the future that now are present with the ability to approach immunodeficiencies. This is one of our immunodeficiency World Weekdays with the bubbles floating about us. And I am forever indebted to Dr. Shearer for his vision and mentorship. And that's why I came to Texas Children's Hospital, and I'm fortunate and privileged to continue. The legacy of David and every PI child in person, you all represent the power of the PI community for every family and everyone facing PI. And now in COVID-19, you represent everyone. Thank you.
Noroski, for that. We really appreciate it. Sorry, I was on mute. With that, I would like to hand it over to Sean McCabe and Dama Flathammer from Takeda for a quick word from our sponsors, and then we'll move on to our closing remarks. Thank you.
Hi. So number one, a sincere thanks. Sorry, we have bedtime over here, so I just had a wanderer coming in. But unbelievable gratitude for just being able to participate in all this. Hard to put a bow on what such a Dr. Noroski, you said it perfectly. It's just such a beautiful story. So kudos to the IDF in coordinating and also putting in such an apropos subject, time and place, and just a very heartfelt thanks to Carol Ann and Yvette and Jerry and Megan and Jennifer. I don't know what else to say other than it's your voice that gives us a real purpose from an industry perspective. In this time, we're hearing so much from the political arena and from the scientific arena and from the medical arena, and how important it is to hear from individuals. And so I guess parting comments is just a simple request from an individual perspective to let your voice be heard. That's what removes a bit of the isolation. We're connected in that way, and just how important it is from our end to hear it. We only know what we're told, and we hope we're providing the right solutions, but please maintain that voice. And again, a sincere thanks. It's just an incredibly powerful evening to be a part of. So my sincere thanks on behalf of everyone.
And Ashley, I'll let Sean speak for all of Takeda. I think I couldn't have said it any better than he just did.
Thank you so much, Dana and Sean. I would like to go do a quick poll, one last quick poll before to enter for the raffle. So what animal do those living with a PI often identify with? Let's see how many people get this right. I know that Yvette did bring up this animal during her presentation. And we will go ahead and end the poll now. And it looks like 96% of you got it right. It is the zebra. With that, I would love to pass it over to John for some closing remarks.
Well, thank you, Ashley, and thank you to everyone who's been part of this today. And for those of you who are new at IDF, we thank people, and we thank them over and over again because really, we have our sponsors, which I'll mention again in a moment, but we do have a professional staff, but we are led in so many ways by our volunteers. And Dr. Nicholas and Dr. Noroski, giving of your time on top of everything else, we are just so truly grateful. And of course, to all of our panelists who are like family to us. Now, I'll just do, since I've got the floor here, I'll do a quick 1, 2, 3. Before we go on to the exhibit hall, I do want to mention that, again, the fun does not have to stop here, and the learning does not have to stop here. We have a ton of publications, including our new Patient and Family Handbook, which you saw that one picture of Dr. Shearer. If you go about 2 pages in, you'll see a whole different picture of Dr. Shearer because that handbook is, in fact, dedicated to him. And Lynn, who I know is on the call, we were talking about all of his great work in past handbooks, and was just such a major part of that. And so many of the folks here on the call have actually had hands in helping us to develop some of these publications. So there's something for everyone in here. So please go and explore if you haven't seen them yet already. And in terms of something for everyone, IDF has a whole host of different options for support. Both Dr. Pate and Megan had kind of alluded to, as had Jerry, the isolation that they are feeling and have seen in our community recently. And again, for small groups, for some one-on-one work through online, offline, we have a whole plethora of opportunities for you to get some support. And if you want to urge some other options, our ears are always open, but do know that we'll probably wrangle you in as a volunteer if you come up with a bright idea. So. And then finally, this was, again, a bit of a different way of taking this sort of educational platform for us. We did not do kind of, the traditional Q&A that sometimes we do when we're in person, but I know that a lot of you do have questions, so please go to Ask IDF. There are ways, if we see a lot of different questions on the same topic, we will go and we will do a blog post, or we will dedicate an entire new meeting to this. So ask your questions. It's the only way that we know what we and our volunteers need to help address. And when we do have a question or 10 in our pipeline, we then are able to turn something around very quickly. So with that, thank you to all of our sponsors. It is, truly thanks to your support that we are able to, again, turn on that dime that we have and to try new things. And your support and your continued ways of engaging with our community are so gratefully appreciated. And so that is the end of the remarks. Thank you. I hope that some elements of this were of interest and hopefully some help to you. And just know that we are always trying to take the new questions and then the classics and make sure that you have all that you need until we all meet again in person and do the hugs, but maybe not the handshaking, because that's just gross. So anyway, have a great evening. Thank you all for participating, and look forward to seeing you all on the interwebs and in person someday when it's all safe for us to be hanging out together. So from all of us at IDF, the Board of Trustees, our sponsors, our friends, and all, thank you and good night.